Final day on 4.3.2. And we have some problems to look at here. I kind of like to think of these as like puzzles because you kind of have to figure out pieces. So you are being asked to find cosine and tangent based on the information they give you. So on example A, they're telling me that the sine of theta is 3/7. Tangent of theta is less than 0. And they want to know what is cosine of theta and what is tangent of theta. Any thoughts of what they're telling us? Okay. Okay. If we think SOHCAHTOA, we know sine is opposite over hypotenuse, yes? And so if we think in that respect, opposite over hypotenuse is going to be 3/7. So when I draw the triangle in a moment, I can draw opposite of 3, hypotenuse of 7. Okay. What is tangent theta less than 0 trying to tell me? Okay, if something is less than 0, what is it? It is negative. Now, tangent is negative. What do you know about the sign of sine? Do you understand what I'm asking there? Is sine positive or negative? What they tell us sine is up here. 3/7, and that's a positive 3/7, yes? So if sine is positive and tangent is negative, can you tell me what quadrant I need to draw this triangle in? He says second quadrant. Does that make sense to you guys? All students take calculus. Do you see why that applies? I need to find the quadrant where tangent is negative, but sine is positive. So if sine's positive, it's got to be all or sine. Tangent's negative, happens right here in quadrant 2. So it's kind of part of the puzzle aspect of my mind because you kind of have to figure it out. So figuring out what quadrant you're in is a huge thing. We're in quadrant 2. I'm going to draw a triangle to represent this problem in quadrant 2 then. So if I'm drawing quadrant 2, here's my quadrant 2. And when I draw the triangle, I'm drawing my radius up from the origin. My triangle is a right triangle here. And remember your theta. Theta is the angle on the x-axis. Okay, it's on the x-axis in the triangle. And your triangle is always on the x-axis. Are you okay with how I drew that triangle? It had to be in quadrant 2. Triangles, when we draw these reference triangles, are on the x-axis. And so that's what I did here. Yes?
So we can't have a triangle where just that corner where theta is touching, but nothing else is touching? Like where it's not, where the bottom leg isn't touching the x-axis. We can't have a triangle like that, can we?
No, because theta has to be on the x-axis. Is that what you're answering? Yeah, no. Theta, remember your reference angle has to be on the x-axis. So you can't draw it up here on the y-axis. It has to be there, which is why my triangle always ends up with one side on the x-axis. Does that answer it? Okay. What can I go ahead and label on this triangle? Opposite and hypotenuse. Opposite is 3, hypotenuse is 7. We're going to need that missing side if we have to find cosine and tangent. So we can use our Pythagorean theorem. Let's see, that's the x value we're missing. So I'm going to say x squared plus 3 squared equals 7 squared. X squared, I don't know, I don't need to write all this out, do I? X squared ends up equaling 40, so x is the square root of 40. So that square root of 40 is that bottom side. Before we finish this problem off, do any of these sides need to have negatives on them? Why would the square root of 40 need to be a negative? Yeah, we're in the second quadrant. How do you move in the second quadrant? You move left and up. If you move left, square root of 40 has to be a negative number. If I move up, 3 is a positive number. And 7 is the hypotenuse or the radius, and so it is always positive. Okay, so watch, depending on what quadrant you're in, your x and or y could be negative. Okay, can you finish this off? We are asked to find what? Cosine tangent?
Cosine would be negative square root of 40 over 7.
You guys like his answer? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So negative square root of 40 over 7. Time out, hold on. My answer key is probably going to simplify that radical. How can we simplify the square root of 40? 4 times 10. So the square root of 4 is 2. So this is negative 2 square root of 10 all over 7. And if it doesn't simplify, it's, it was just good practice there. Okay, what about tangent then? I got what you're trying to say. Okay, so opposite over adjacent, right? So officially that is the 3 over the negative square root of 40 is how I'm going to put it for the moment. But if we simplify it, it's the 3 over the negative 2 square root of 10. And they have not been rationalizing lately, so I'm just going to leave it as that. Questions on what we did there? Ready to try problem 2?
I know for notes you do triangles to help us understand, but you aren't looking for triangles on the paper, are you?
Not necessarily, but I think triangles would be incredibly helpful in this particular type. I mean, in certain types, I draw the triangles in the notes, and yeah, maybe it's overkill, you don't need it. This one, I think it's helpful to get, although I guess if you just label what's opposite, what's hypotenuse, however, you have to just be able to tell me what's negative, So I guess it's doable without a triangle, but I think it is helpful. Does that make sense? Okay. Secant of theta is 3. Sine of theta is greater than 0. They want to know cosine theta and tangent theta again. What kind of things can you tell me based on what they provided? Why? Okay, so we know sine of theta is greater than 0.
We know that the cosine is 1 over 3.
Okay, so sine of theta was positive, it's greater than 0. Secant, Chandler went a different direction with it. And there's two different things we can talk about. First of all, we know secant here is positive, yes. It's also the reciprocal of cosine, so that means we know cosine is positive. So if they're both positive, we're in quadrant 1, because the only place you can have two different types positive is quadrant 1. Now, Chandler's going to try and tell me we already know cosine. How do we know cosine? Reciprocal of secant. What's the reciprocal of 3? 1 over 3. Okay.
Actually, no, sorry. Sine is just, yeah, you don't have that yet. We have your adjacent and hypotenuse.
I could go with we have adjacent and hypotenuse. Adjacent is 1, hypotenuse is 3. We still have to know tangent, which means we still have to find opposite. So again, I'm going to draw a triangle. This time I'm drawing my triangle so it is positioned in quadrant 1. So here's quadrant 1. My triangle looks something like this. Theta is in the angle by the origin on the x-axis. We said adjacent is 1. Hypotenuse is 3. What is my opposite? Square root of 8. Because 1 squared plus y squared equals 3 squared. So 9 minus 1 is 8, square root of 8. Are any of these sides of negative value? No, we're in quadrant 1. Quadrant 1, everything's positive. You go right, it's positive. You go up, it's positive. Everybody's positive. So what is my tangent? Opposite over adjacent. Square root of 8 over 1, which is square root of 8. Which, if you want, simplifies to be 2 square root of 2.
Why is the negative square root of 40 negative? Or why is that negative if 1 is a negative?
Square root of 40 was negative because it was in the second quadrant, and x values in the second quadrant are negative. When this triangle, you had to go left, and so the x value had to be negative.
Okay, so you go positive.
Here you go right and up in quadrant 1, so everybody's positive. Just like if you're in a triangle and you have to go down, your y value is going to be negative. Part of the reason I draw the picture so I can talk about this stuff. Again, if someone wants to argue they could do this without a triangle, I get it. I don't think everyone can, though. I think some people definitely need the triangles. Okay. Cotangent theta is undefined. Secant theta is negative. Thoughts? For undefined? No. Something over 0. Okay, so cotangent, because it's undefined, has to be something over 0. Okay? Now, think about this. Let's reverse back to tangent. What do you know about tangent? In terms of what we talked about yesterday, in terms of our x's and y's. Sorry, let me specify better. Tangent is y over x. If tangent is y over x, what's cotangent? X over y. So what that means is that my y value has to be 0. X value is something other than 0. Now, could you go ahead and tell me what tangent is here? If cotangent is undefined, the reciprocal of undefined is going to be 0. Does that make sense? I'm getting some quietness here. Because tangent would be 0 over something. And 0 over something is 0. Now, where did these zeros happen, guys? Do you remember? Zeros happened when we were on what types of angles? The quadrantal angles? 90, 180, 270, 360?
0, 1.
Yeah. Okay. So we know y is 0. Well, we can narrow 2 of these out. If y is 0, what are my options?
0, -1, 0, 1.
Not if y is 0. If y is 0, we either need 1, 0 and negative 1, 0. So it either has to be 0 or 180 or 0 or pi. Now, what's going to determine this? Secant is negative. Secant is reciprocal of cosine. What variable is cosine? X. So that means secant is 1 over x.
That means that cosine is negative, so it'd be on the left side.
That means my x value has to be negative. So that means I'm over here. So, if that's the case, what is my cosine value going to be? Remember, in an ordered pair, it is cosine sine. So cosine is? Did anyone say it? Negative. Well, the cosine itself is just negative 1. Okay. So the key is when you see those zeros and those undefineds, think of your quadrant angles. So think of 0, 90, 180, or 270. And then figure out from there, this is based on the fact that y had to be the 0, so we could get to there. And then secant is negative, which is cosine is negative, so x is negative. And there we go. Okay. Your homework that is due tomorrow or whenever I next see you is page 347. If you haven't got started on it, you have lots to get started on it. You can? Yep. Bye, Preston.